Hello friends, my name is Shivam from DevOps Schools and I will help you to enable your learning process in various technologies of DevOps, artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data and many more. This is our initiative to help you by sharing multiple tutorials and videos. And if you want any specific tutorials or any particular topic, then please do comment in the below comment section and I will help you with it. Also, please subscribe to our premium services on YouTube, which will give you access to more content and videos to enhance your knowledge about all these topics. Also, if you want me to help you with regards to the online trainings and classroom sessions by our qualified trainers, then please do write me at contact@devopsschool.com. Thank you.
Yeah, tell me.
Yeah,
Right?
Ananta. So I created that private VPC and that public one, but the IP that is mentioned in that instructions. So for the I think the public got created fine, that but the private IP is different. It's 172.31.0.0.
Yeah, same thing with me. In the same case.
Yeah.
Is
In
that
what
fine?
step you're referring to?
So when we first created the VPC, that time
It
Yeah,
is the
subnet.
task one, the last
Right?
step. Task one, the last two sentences shows the
No,
IP addresses of each of the subnets.
you're talking to step number 13, right?
9. Step number 9.
step number 9, yeah.
Step number
Seven,
9
seven or 9, yeah.
here, right? Click
Yeah.
on VPC public subnet 1 and private subnet 1. Okay.
Yeah.
So where is the IP address mentioned here?
So not here. So after after coming to step 9, when we clicked on OK, it showed the two VPC. Two subnets, I think, or two VPC. One is with IP 10.0.0.0 and one is 172.31.0.0. But here in the document it is mentioned that it will be 10.0.1.x. Oh, so it's not
Okay.
matching.
Okay.
This,
So when you created that, you selected the VPC IP address CIDR range as in the step here itself. It is not showing 10.0.1.0. It is showing 172. That right?
yeah.
Okay. So maybe you may just make a note of that change wherever you see that resembling thing. So maybe by default you will also get this 10.0.1 or 172.0.0.0. That also is one possible public what is IP address. So it's okay. You can continue with that IP addresses only. But make a note of this change wherever you have the 10.0.0.0, you replace that with your 172.0.0.
Okay, fine.
That's the only change, right?
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, you can just have a reference of that.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay, next screen we can see the same IP. I mean, when we go to the next screen, comes up as 10.0.0, whatever is first mentioned.
Okay. So you have two subnets now with CIDR range of 10.0.0.0 and 10.0.1.0, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, maybe there is some change in the IP structure, but it's still okay as long as you have two subnets. Lab 1. So you can end your lab, both of you.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll generate the report after that. All right, great. So you have ended the labs, right? Okay. All right. So any questions after the lab?
No questions. Only that that IP, I don't know how it got changed. We got that 172.31, and later again we went back to that original one.
So I mean, it happens at times. So these labs are at times it goes out of sync from this scripts. So in general, these labs are provisioned by some automated scripts, and those scripts may go out of sync from this text maybe. So there is a possibility of such errors in these labs in general, but not on the actual environments, because these labs are pre-created for you. If you remember, you have not created a user, you have not created much of your login details and all. So they are pre-created. So this pre-creation is done by using some scripts, and these scripts are created by instructors who will create it for the users, for the students. So it might be possible that it might go out of sync at times.
Okay.
All right. So are you also back from your break, or you wanted to have a break for some quick coffee, tea, something?
Yeah,
I want
I would like to
10 minutes.
take a break.
Yeah.
You want to go for a break?
Yeah.
All right, then we will take a break for 10 minutes. Let's resume after 10, 11:43, 45.
Okay.
All right, I'll be here.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Yep. All right. So in this module, let's continue in the same module. So we had briefly discussed about VPC and EC2. We have a lot of things on that coming in near future. But yes, let's now move on to storage. So for storage, we have one service which is S3, simple storage service, which is called as, and it is a storage which is designed to make web scale computing easier. It provides a simple web interface for users to retrieve any amount of data at any given point in time from anywhere on the web. This is a typical object storage. This is not like your file storage where you store things in a file and files can be edited. Rather, this is a sort of object storage. We call it as object storage. And the difference between this and your file storage will be like your you replace the objects. You cannot edit the objects once they are stored on the S3. So this is very lightweight API, and it gives you ability to store any amount of data, and it can be accessed using HTTP, simple HTTP access. Using HTTP methods, you can store data, retrieve data, delete, and all those operations can be done. It is highly scalable, reliable, fast, and durable. Right. So some facts about S3. S3 can store an unlimited amount of data in a bucket. There is as such no limit, but each object can be up to of 5 terabytes of size. You can have an object of 5 terabyte in a bucket, and technically the bucket can have any number of objects, no limit, no bucket size limit as such. This is designed to give you a 99.999, we call this as 11 nines durability. So that is the amount of durability it provides at any given point in time. 11 nines we call it as, and 99.99% of availability of objects over a given year. So the possibility of failure is very less. So your objects, once they are stored, are always available and they are durable. Okay. You can use HTTPS endpoints to store and retrieve any amount of data. It is highly scalable, reliable, fast, and inexpensive. It is a very cost-effective way of storing elements data on your web. It also provides you an option of using server-side encryption for your data at rest. When you store a data in the S3 bucket, you can encrypt that. And you can always do the auditing by access logs. You can check access logs as to what is the data which is coming in and going out of S3. This is provided on standard REST and SOAP based interfaces. So that's how typically S3 is designed for. And the reliability, durability, and availability is highly efficient. That makes it a highly scalable and reliable service to use. So some common use case scenarios for S3. You will use it as a storage and backup. In general, you will store it as a simple file storage if you want on web, and if you want to provide some backup for your application data or your images or your infrastructure, you may use S3 as a backup. You may also use it for application file hosting. You can host simple static content on S3, and you can link your static content from your web applications in S3, and they can refer to that static data. It can also be used for hosting media. You may have images, you may have audio, video clips. You can store it in S3 and render them using your applications to any part of the globe. You can also use it as a software delivery mechanism where you build your software and host it on S3, and your users can simply download it from there. You can also use it for storing AMIs and snapshots. So S3 has a wide variety of use cases. You can simply host a static website on S3, and people can access it without having a need of a VM or a web server, you can host your static data as well. All right. So S3 stores data in as objects in a bucket. So all the data is stored as objects within a bucket. An object is composed of a file and a metadata. Metadata is optional, but that describes your file. You can have up to 100 buckets in each account. So the amount of buckets are sort of limited to an account, but the amount of data within a bucket is not limited as such. You can use any amount of data within your bucket. And you can control objects of the bucket, and it's you can control access on the objects as well as the buckets. So you have access option to access control your buckets as well as the objects. So you can have buckets and objects at both level. You can provide the access control. What is an object? In general, object is something which is having a file and metadata, and mind it that these files are not changed dynamically on the storage. So once you store it, the file is not editable unless you replace it. You change the other file entirely. That's how it is. So you can create object, you can update or replace the object, you can delete the object on the bucket. And for all that, you have to have access to your APIs, your S3 APIs. Using simple REST protocol, you can do all the operations. And these buckets are region specific. When you create a bucket, your bucket will be visible across the region. So this is how your object key is identifier for in a bucket. So this is the URL of your bucket, and this is the object, Amazon s3.html, and this is your bucket URL. So this is how your objects are accessible. First of all, you have to understand this simple concept that S3 stores objects as bucket, data as objects within a bucket. And as I mentioned already, object is a composition of a file and metadata. To store the object in S3, you simply upload the file you want to store in a bucket. When you upload, you can set permissions on the object and you can add any amount of metadata. Buckets are logical containers for objects. Buckets are what? They are simple logical containers. You can have one or more buckets in your account. As I mentioned, that a limit is specified to the bucket count for one account, which is approximately 100. But for each bucket, you can have any amount of data. You can control access on the bucket at an individual object. Right? We will see how it looks like and how do you access objects in a bucket. But how do you provide a security to your objects? S3 security, you can control access to buckets and objects within using this ACL bucket policies and IAM policies. You can provide ACL as to who will be allowed to access. You can provide bucket policies, and you can also assign identity and access management policies to a bucket as to who can use it or not. We will see what IAM refers to and its details later part of the course. You can also upload and download data to Amazon S3 via SSL encrypted endpoints. You can encrypt data using AWS SDK. If at all you want to encrypt your data on the transit, you can use AWS SDK. At the rest, if you want to encrypt your data, you can simply encrypt your buckets as well. You can say the bucket to encrypt the data in that. And then there is a concept of versioning in S3. So this versioning, if you enable versioning, it protects from accidental overwrites and deletes with no performance penalty. So basically you can provide versioning on your objects, which means that you can store multiple versions of the same object within the same bucket without any performance penalty. So the idea is, if you look at this image here for an example illustration, I have drawn a photo.gif with an idea of 121212. Firstly, I have stored hang on, sorry for that. So I have stored so this image ID is 1111. Then I have overridden the same file, or maybe I have stored another version 2 with ID 121212. So by default, this versioning is not enabled, but if you enable it, you have a provision of storing multiple versions of the same file. Here I have two versions. With that, whenever you delete accidentally, maybe if you delete a file accidentally, or even if you want to do it explicitly, if you delete photo.gif, there will be just a reference which will be deleted, but the objects will be still there available in your bucket, unless you explicitly delete all the elements of that object, all the versions of that object. So it generates a new version with every upload. By default, it does the new versioning for you. You don't have to create versions manually. That is done by S3 automatically. It allows you to easily retrieve the deleted objects or roll back to previous versions. So that is also possible. You can retrieve the deleted objects, or if you want, you can also roll back to previous versions. So there are three states of an Amazon S3 bucket. Unversioned, by default it is unversioned, as I told you. You enable the version or you suspend the version. So once you suspend the version, you don't have the option of again re-enabling it unless you create a new bucket. So you version enable, you suspend, then you use unversioned by default. So S3 object lifecycle can have different states. Lifecycle management, if you think of that. So using lifecycle management, S3 manages objects during their lifetime. Some objects that you store in S3 might have a well-defined lifecycle. Like for example, if you are uploading a log to your bucket, your application might need these logs for a week or a month after you create it, okay? And then you might want to delete them. So you can enable that sort of life cycles on your objects. Some documents are frequently accessed for a limited period of time, and then you might want to archive those objects. You might not want to have a real-time access to those objects, but you still need to maintain them. You don't want to delete it forever, so you can sort of archive them for a longer period. That is also one use case. Digital media archives, financial and health record archives, there are some examples for considering the archival life cycle. Again, you can have long-term database backups and data that you must retain for some compliance issue maybe. Okay, there are some types of use cases where you will see, where you will upload to S3 primarily for archival purpose. All right. And again, what you pay for it, the pay is again as per your usage. It is based on the capacity and bandwidth you actually use. You only pay for what you use. There is no minimum fee for getting started on S3. Prices are based on location of your Amazon S3 bucket, in which region are you selecting it, and then estimated monthly bill is also can be used to estimate some monthly usage pricing. Pricing is available as storage pricing, request pricing. Now pricing can change at the number of requests what you are making. Maybe you are making too many requests for some data, then you might have to pay a little more for that. So S3 pricing is based on capacity as well as the bandwidth which is used. There are two things to be considered here. That is how it is. And the data transfer pricing is also there. Data which is coming out of S3 is chargeable. And then there is this Amazon Glacier. It is a sort of extension to S3, which provides you an ability to have archival service coming at a very low cost. It is good for infrequent access data, which is not frequently accessed. You might want to archive them. It is designed for, again, 11 nines durability, which is as good as S3. But the difference here is you will have a standard retrieval time of 3 to 5 hours. You may not get the file retrieved as fast as S3 does. So you may have a standard retrieval time which is approximately 3 to 5 hours. So if your use case is okay to have that amount of retrieval time, but you get at a very low cost, you might want to choose Amazon Glacier for archival purpose. It costs less than $0.01 per gig per month. Okay. Again, it depends on your region, obviously, but yeah, that comes at a very low cost. So there are these three storage classes in Amazon S3. S3 standard, which gives you 11 nines durability and 99.99 availability. Then there you have standard S3 standard infrequent access, okay, which also gives a similar durability and availability, but it is mostly suitable for infrequently accessed data. So if you want, you can also have a life cycle in which you set these stages. You can have initially you store data to S3 as step 1. In step 2, you might make them promote to infrequent access, and in step 3, you make them promoted to Glacier. So let me have a quick demo of S3 for you. So if you see, I am in S3 now. I have a few buckets which I created in past. I can delete them because I don't use them.
You can't delete multiple, is it?
Yeah, you cannot delete multiple.
Okay.
All right. So when you come here, when you have no objects and no buckets, this is how it looks like. If you want to create a bucket, so you will come here. So by one thing, what we have to make a note here is bucket names are all unique across AWS environment. It should be unique. So if I do something like demo bucket, it might already be used by someone. Bucket name already exists. It's not in my account, but externally also, if anyone has this bucket, I may not be able to use that name. This is one thing what we have to remember. So you have to enter a DNS compliant bucket name. I have something like tech.
Please enroll our general membership for $399 plan to get access of all the parts.
Along with that, you can access our other tutorials such as Docker, Ansible, Jenkins, Terraform, Splunk, AWS, Azure, and various other DevOps related premium tutorials with our channel membership. If you would have any issues with our channel membership, you can drop an email to us at contact@devopsschool.com, or you can also unsubscribe from channel membership anytime if you don't want to continue or did not like the video. To get our channel membership, click onto the join button, select the 3D99 plan and grow your skills immensely. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries. We will reply to them at the earliest. Thanks for watching.